Hey, good evening, everybody. It's Mr. Berkeley again. And what I'm going to do is this I'm going to try one more time to read this book on Instagram Live. If it kicks me out again, like it did yesterday, and doesn't give me the ability to save it, I'm just going to wait until I can do my read alouds on TikTok like I want to, and I'm just going to record them and then post them up. So, I'm going to now read for you chapter 16 on the road of Mr. Popper's Penguins. So, here we go. Chapter 16 on the road. During the next day, there was much to be done at 432 Proudfoot Avenue. There were new clothes to buy for all of them, and the old ones to pack away in mothballs. Then Mrs. Popper had to scrub and polish and straighten the whole place, for she was much too good a housekeeper to leave everything at sixes and sevens while the Poppers were away. Mr. Greenbaum sent them their first week's pay in advance. The first thing they did was to pay off the man who installed the freezing plant in the basement. He had been getting rather uneasy about his money, and after all, without him, they could never have trained the penguins. Next, they sent a check to the company who had been shipping the fresh fish all the way from the coast. At last, everything was done, and Mr. Popper turned the key in the door of the little house. They were a little late in arriving at the railway station on account of the argument with the traffic policeman. The argument was on account of the accident of the two taxicabs. With 4 Poppers and 12 penguins, not to mention the 8 suitcases and a pail of water with a live fish for the penguins' lunch, Mr. Popper found that they could not all fit into one cab, so they had to call a second one. Each of the taxi drivers were eager to be the first to get to the station and surprise the people there by opening the door of his cab and letting out 6 penguins. So they raced each other all the way, and in the last block they tried to pass each other, and one of the fenders got torn off. The traffic officer naturally got very much annoyed. The train was about to pull out of the station when they arrived. Even with both taxi drivers helping them through the gate and over the brass rails onto the rear observation platform, they barely made it. The penguins were gasping. It had been decided that Mr. Popper should ride in the baggage car with the penguins to keep them from getting nervous, while Mr. Popper and the children should ride in on one of the Pullmans. Because of getting on at the observation end of the train, Mr. Popper had to take the birds through the whole length of the train. It was easy enough to get them through the club car, even with the pail of fish to carry. In the sleeping cars, however, where the porter was already making up some of the berths, there was trouble. The porter's ladder offered too much temptation to the penguins. There were a dozen happy orks from a dozen ecstatic beaks. Popper's performing penguins, completely forgetting their discipline, fought to climb the ladders and get to the upper berths. Poor Mr. Popper. One old lady screamed that she was getting off the train, whether it was going 90 miles an hour or not. A gentleman wearing a clergyman's collar suggested opening a window so that the penguins could jump out. 2 porters tried to shoo the birds out of the berths. Finally, the conductor and the brakeman with a lantern came to the rescue. It was quite a while before Mr. Popper got his pets safely into the baggage car. Mr. Popper worried a little at the start over the idea of having Janie and Bill miss 10 weeks of school while they were on the road, though the children did not seem to mind. And you remember, my loves, said Mr. Popper, who had never been out of Stillwater, in spite of his dreams of distant countries. That travel is very broadening. From the start, the Penguins were a riotous success. Even their opening performance in Seattle went off without a hitch, probably because they had already rehearsed on a real stage. It was here that the Penguins added a little novelty of their own to the program. They were the first thing on the bill. When they finished their regular act, the audience went wild. They clapped and stamped and roared for more of Popper's performing Penguins. Janie and Bill helped their father herd the Penguins off the stage so that the next act could go on. This next act was a tightrope walker named Monsieur Duval. The trouble was that instead of watching him from the wings, as they should have done, the Penguins got interested and walked on the stage again to watch him more closely. Unfortunately, at this moment, Monsieur Duval was doing a very difficult dance on the wire overhead. The audience, of course, had thought the Penguins were all through and were very much pleased to see them return and line up with their backs to the audience and look up at Monsieur Duval dancing so carefully on the wire high above them. This made everyone laugh so hard that Monsieur Duval lost his balance. Yikes. "Ork," said the Penguins, waddling away hurriedly in order to not be under him when he fell. Cleverly recovering his balance, Monsieur Duval caught the wire by the inside of his elbow and saved himself. He was very angry when he saw the Popper performing Penguins opening wide their 12 red beaks as if they were laughing at him. "Go away, you stupid things," he said to them in French. "Ork," said the Penguins, pretending not to understand, and making remarks to each other in Penguin language about Monsieur Duval. And whenever they appeared, the more they interfered with the other acts on the program, the better the audiences liked them. That's it for tonight. All right, so tomorrow night, chapter 17. Have a good night, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.